So a lot of times people then will ask me, well, what's the right ratio? And Paul alluded to this earlier. You want it to be, kind of maybe 70% of what you're spending in your core, maybe 20% in your kind of platforms, maybe 10% on options. You don't want to bet the farm on options. They're too risky. You do want to put something behind them. So I had this great interaction with the senior team of a medical devices company, a kind of company that makes, incontinence treatments and, body fluid bags and, really glamorous stuff. I went to meet them, and the CEO comes up to meet me, and he kind of puts his arms around my shoulder, and he says, "Darling, if you live long enough, you will need our stuff." Fabulous. I can hardly wait. Anyway, okay, so his strategy is all about customer responsiveness and speed to market. That is our strategy, and it just wasn't happening for him. And so you ask the question, well, what kind of portfolio would you have if it was all about customer responsiveness and speed to market? And I would argue it would look a lot like Walmart, right? You are going to have a ton of stuff in the core space. You're going to have a few things in the platform space because that drives efficiency and so forth. But you're not going to have a huge amount of options, right? You're really, really be focused on the core. I would argue if that is your strategy. So what we did was we just did an analysis. And we've got software, by the way, now that helps you do this in a much more fast way than we did. We did it on spreadsheets, but the results that we found look like this. Each of these bubbles is a project. Each of the project sizes was kind of a impact the thing could have in terms of upside. The numbers inside were the person months that were going to be required to bring it to market. To do this whole portfolio was going to take about 4 years. The empty bubbles on this chart, you see there were some that are empty. These are things that were on the project list. They'd typically been promised to a customer, but no one was actually working on them. Okay, you're the CEO. I hand you this picture, which is what's actually going on in your organization. What's your reaction? It's a lot, first of all. 4 years to not be able to do anything new unless you add more resources, that's a long time. But I think the thing that particularly drew my eye when we first came up with it was the distribution. And what you will find is this is a very common problem is there are these 4 things that get disconnected in companies, and it got disconnected here. First thing, your strategy process. You all know how that works, right? The senior people go up to the mountaintop. They are consulted with by a consultant or a professor or McKinsey or somebody, and they spend 3 days arguing about the difference between mission and vision. They get the T-shirts printed with whatever it is they came up with, and they come down from the mountaintop. I'm being facetious. I've been in a few like that. But anyway, hopefully your strategy process is really a hard-nosed look at the future. Where do we want to be? What are the strategic inflection points we need to be paying attention to? What are we going to be doing? And so your strategy, when it's done right, is pulling you into the future. Then we come to your budget process. Where does this year's budget start? Last year's budget. Of course, you got to start somewhere, right? But a lot of times strategy's pulling you into the future, and your budget's doing what? Anchoring you in the past. So the first disconnect is how do you bring those two together? So ask your senior leadership, given our strategy, how many of what kind of project should we be working on? A very simple question to ask, a very difficult one to answer. Because if you're not looking at that whole portfolio and saying, as my strategy evolves, so should my portfolio, right? That's common sense. Very seldom is it practiced. Very, very few companies actually make the effort to do that. Third thing, what do people feel they're going to get rewarded for? In this particular company, the important people were the people that had developed the last generation platform. And so that's what they wanted to do. Nobody wanted to work on the core. Oh, for God's sake, that's for wussies. Make it a little longer, make it thinner, ship it to me twice a week instead of, who wants to work on that mind-blowingly boring stuff? And options, too risky. You might lose your reputation for infallibility if you worked on options. And so the entire political center of gravity in this business was centered around platforms, which was a disconnect from what they said their strategy was all about. And yet the people process, that's where people wanted to work. Next generation platform. This, by the way, would have been very much what Microsoft's portfolio looked like, in the Steve Ballmer era, because the thing that mattered was, did you ship it, right? Was it good? Did customers like it? Was anybody willing to pay? Did it function as noted? Much less important, but did you ship it was the dominant mantra there. And then the last thing we have is the project approval process. And I never cease to be amazed at how people that have the decision rights over what projects get worked on or not are completely disconnected from the strategy process, only lightly connected to the budget process, and often have nothing to say about the kind of internal HR and so forth. They have a different logic that they're working on. So somehow, if you're going to get control of this, you need to have a way of linking up your strategy, your budgets, your projects, and your people. And the way I recommend doing it is starting with the simple question, how many of what kind of project does our strategy suggest we require? In terms of percentages. And 70-20-10 is a good place to start. You may have exceptional circumstances if you are indeed, as one of my clients is, in a business where the CEO has said, incremental is not going to cut it. We need to do revolutionary. You're going to need to allocate a lot more resource to that option space.